Before I start with chapter 2, I wanted to go back to Puerto Rico for a minute and talk about how I broke my leg. They were building new houses in our subdivision, Saltina, and right next to us or a couple places down. And they'd work through the week, and then us kids would go down there and they'd play we would play during the weekend. And they built their houses really weird. They built like the front of or the back of the house and then somehow attached the front to it. So they had these big scaffolding that was the same level as the second floor. And us kids were jumping off this scaffolding onto the second floor of the house because there was no front on the house. And that was all fun and everything was really cool. And it was my turn, and I must have pushed off too hard, and the scaffolding probably was sitting on sand or something. And anyway, instead of making it to the second floor, I dropped straight down, and my head landed on a rock, a sizable rock, and my left ankle landed on a rock, and I was out. I came to, and several of the kids are around me and freaking out. And some of them had gone down to get my mom and dad because I was out. And I came to, and I was totally disoriented. And I looked down and I saw my ankle. And if this is my heel, kind of like that, if this was my heel and these were my toes, my whole ankle was like this. So it was kind of this right angle going in toward, facing the other leg. And it was weird. And it really freaked me out because bodies don't do that. And so one of the first things I did was I put my foot back. I set it because I couldn't look at it being weird like that. So my parents come and they're all upset and freaking out, how all that goes. And they get me back to the house, and my dad's like, "Oh, it's not broke, you just sprained it." And he's got it, they've got it in a pan with ice in it and water. And I'm like, "No, Dad, I broke it." And he was insistent. So I said, "Well, look at this." And I tapped the baby toe left side of my foot, and it flipped into this right angle again. And he's like, "Oh." So then I had to reset it a second time. And that was rough. The first time was instinct. The second time it was like, and it was horrible. So Mom took me up to Buena Vista Hospital. I talked about that earlier. And of course, to the ER. Nobody spoke Spanish. My mom had broken Spanish. And they figured out, they x-rayed it. It was broken. And so they went ahead and casted it there at the hospital. And came home. And she got me all propped up in bed with my ankle up. And I stopped her before she left the room. And I said, "Mom," I said, "when I was out," I said, "I went to the Garden of Eden." And she said, "Oh, really?" Like, she didn't believe me. I was like, "Yeah, the flowers and the trees." And I said, "I think Adam and Eve were there." And so I just had this incredibly, really profound kind of experience. It was vision-like, and it was with a lot of the things that I've had, there's reality as we know it, and it's real in all the senses that we have. But these other experiences I've had go beyond that reality. It is like the most super duper duper reality you could ever know. Think of when, you have a baby or you get married, or, just the most astounding moment in your life, and then times that times thousands. And that's how real these things are. So anyway, and then she said, "Okay, we'll go to sleep." And I'll never forget this. She shut off the light, and she's starting to walk down the hall, and my dad would burp all the time. And so he let this big burp. And when he burped, we had an earthquake, which is quite funny. Another thing I left out of the first chapter one was when I was 4 years old. I was grinding my teeth down in nubs, and I had a real hard time sleeping and wasn't breathing good. And so they ended up taking out my tonsils. And in post-op, I'm there, and there's this big ruckus going on the other side of the room. And there's this little girl, and I guess she coded, and all these doctors and nurses are, responding, I guess, to a code. I don't know. I didn't know what that was when I was young, but I now know that that's what it was. And I'm standing on the other side of the room, and I'm like, I was really concerned. I'm like, is she going to be okay? And there was somebody standing on the other side of the room with me. And I was told that, yeah, she's going to be okay, and it's going to be all right and everything. And then, I don't remember anything. But a little bit later when I'm out there and I get to order my ice cream, because when you get a sore throat, you get an ice cream. And the nurse was there that had been in the post-op with me. And I asked, and my mom was there, and I asked the nurse, I said, how would that little girl do? Is she okay? Is she going to be okay? And mom's like, oh, what happened? What little girl? And the nurse is like, oh, kids say the funniest things. And so she told her you wrote it off. But that was another one of those moments when it's just beyond normal reality. And so I believe that girl in that bed was me, and me standing on the other side with a companion. So that was like, I think, my first experience. And then here, this one in the Garden Eden was my second experience. So I wanted to make sure I told that story. So we're flying back to America, Mom and his kids. Dad had gone before us. He got this job in north west Iowa. And so he'd gone there. He found a house, got his job set up, and then, we followed. And we actually flew to Denver. And my grandpa, his dad, Grandpa M, was there to pick us up. He was a very tall man, had a cowboy hat on and blue jeans and button-down shirt, and not the diamond buttons. It was regular buttons, and he was quiet, friendly, but just a more reserved kind of guy. And so we got all our stuff and went to the ranch. My grandpa owned 10,000 acres in eastern Colorado of working cattle ranch. And so we got in late at night and, got in the house, and Grandma tells us that one of the cows had a calf and she rejected it, and that it's in the bathtub. And they, it's an old house, and they had one of those old claw-footed tubs. And so all of us kids go running in the bathroom, and there's this baby calf in the tub. It was so cool. And if you had to go potty, you had to go potty with a cow next to you in the tub. It was our introduction to the Wild Wild West and Colorado. It was amazing. As kids, got to run and play and do stuff. I think at one point we were sliding down the roof of the barn into the hayloft. We just did all kinds of stuff, and Grandpa'd take us out, and we'd go feed the cows, and us kids would have to count them, and always seemed like there was enough cowboy boots for us kids, and they may not have fit perfectly, but he had some from my dad and those kids left over. So so we got to go out and work and help on the ranch. It was really fun. And the funny thing about that is that my grandma didn't know our full stories yet. She knew that Mom there was adoptions, that there was children that were adopted. I was so dark from running in the jungles, being on the beaches. I was really, really dark. When I tan, I can get dark. And she thought I was a little Puerto Rican girl that they had adopted. And so I don't know. She just had a tender spot for me in her heart after that. She found out I wasn't a child adopted from Puerto Rico, but that didn't matter. She'd already taken me under her wing. And, I remember later visits, she'd make this Texas sheet cake, and oh my gosh, I love that stuff. And I wanted to have a piece of Texas sheet cake, and Mom's like, you don't need that. Just stay away from that. My mom always was on me about my weight, and my grandma turned around and said, Leslie, if you want that piece of cake, you go ahead and get it. And to me, that made her my hero. Not just because I got the cake, but because she stood up for me to my mom, and that was big. And she had my whole heart. I remember, I'll say a little bit about Colorado. I can come back to it. But my poor grandma, my grandma S taught sister number one how to knit, crochet. When grandma S made applesauce, sister number one was her. Grandma did all this stuff with sister number one because sister one was interested in it. Me, I wanted to go fishing with grandpa. I wanted to go pick berries with grandpa. I was all about grandpa. I've always been a daddy's girl, and was a bit of a tomboy, to be honest with you. And go out in the garden and help him. And I remember Grandpa S called us Sam and Willie. Me and sister number one were Sam and Willie. I don't think either of us could really honestly tell you which one was Sam and which one was Willie. But, yeah, so I definitely enjoyed, the other stuff, not the girly stuff. But Grandma M was bound and determined to teach us while I grew up, just not all when we got there, but try to help us learn how to cook and how to sew and do some of these things. And I remember her, she's, I'm sewing with her, and to me, that thing's a gas pedal. And she's like, Leslie, it's not a gas pedal. All I want to do is push that thing down and, I was obsessed with driving. And my grandma let me start driving out there on the ranch when I was probably 12 years old. And I drove all the time, as much as I could drive. And the only rule is to not hit the cows. So, but from our first introduction, we probably spent a week or two there. And then we all got on a train, and we took the train to Iowa, which was a cool experience. We got to be on a train and take a train trip. I'm so glad we got to do that. We ended up in Iowa, and I don't think Dad had found the house yet. I guess they were going to do that together. So we lived in a mobile home for a little while. And again, culture shock. So we've gone from California, which is the Golden State. Everything's perfect in my eye, except for the people now. Then to snow in Utah and mountains. And then from there to jungle and monkeys. And now we're out there in Colorado, the Wild Wild West. And now we're in farming capital of the world. And it's all green, it's farming, it's rural. I love everybody, but Iowa people are the most bland people on earth. And it is cold there. Cold. I've lived in other places colder, but it's cold. So the people are just really kind of whatever. Anyway, so we got there, and they did buy a house, and we lived there for a while. I don't know if it was a year, part of a year, and some creepy stuff started happening to me, and by my stepfather, touching me inappropriately. And I told sister number two, because we're a package deal. She's my twin, and I didn't know what to do. I wasn't sure what it was, and I mean, I was told it was a massage. It's just nothing, and And I told sister number one, and she's like, no, that's not, no, that's bad. That's bad. And so let's call mom. And mom was working at the phone department again, um, and phone company, I should say. And so we called mom. She was working nights and told her what had happened. And she's like, oh, no, 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 you must be mistaken. You know, he just must have accidentally done this, blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, oh, okay, but this is what happened. Oh, no, you're just thinking wrong. So it happened again. Told sister number one again. And this is a little, I mean, it was always going on after it first happened. And we went to my mom again. Me and sister number one called her. And she said, no, you're wrong. That's not what's happening. And I wish you'd stop calling and telling me this stuff. I don't want you to call me again with this stuff. This is not what's happening. I don't want to hear about this anymore. So, hung up the phone. That connection to my mom was severed. My mom was not going to help me. Once we left California, Grandma and Grandpa S were in the rearview mirror. I probably saw them 3, 4, maybe 5 times the rest of my life. So it wasn't like I could, go to them. Of course, I wouldn't go to Grandma M or Grandpa M. Didn't even know them. And my mom's mom? No way. No way. So, sister number one later brought it in the middle of a fight amongst all of us kids. So now no longer can I no longer have sister number one. Because she'll speak of it and it will become a big fight. And it all came back on me. It always came back on me. Leslie did this. Leslie starting the problem. Blah, 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 blah. And of course, sister number one would get smashed up for it too. So, sister number one and I were severed. And not just with me, but my dad's daughters started to come live with us. First one was his second oldest daughter, and she came to live with us, which was a nightmare. And she was with us, I think, for a year. And then his third oldest daughter came, and she lived with us. And I think she may have lived with us 3 or 4 years. But we only lived in Iowa for 5 years. So I think his second oldest daughter came and was there for 4 years. And then his third oldest daughter was there for 3 years. So that's how long they lived with us. And the one time that my sister number one, we were all of us were arguing, Dad's daughters and us, over whatever, it was a house full of kids and unsupervised, and somebody pissed someone off, and so we'd have these big battles, and not hitting or anything, just word arguing, and then, my sister number one threw it down, and my stepdad's daughter's like, you liar, my dad would never do that, blah, 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 blah. And that's when it became, I can't talk to my other half anymore about it. And I believe sister, my dad's youngest daughter, was, I don't know. Her and I became like best friends, which left my twin, odd man out, which was really wonderful because that severed me relying on her and her using that as a weapon. So, because she did not get along with my stepdad. She did not. She was not interested in assimilating into my stepdad's family. And so she, in a way, was dangerous to the stability of the family in that way. And so having Dad's youngest daughter in between kind of distanced that from happening, I think, for them. I'm stupid. I became friends with her. I did like her. We had fun, did stuff, but I lost my twin. So we were living there. My mom got pregnant, and she had a baby in 1975, and she hadn't been able to have a baby prior to that, but they had this medic. She's got that weird blood, that whatever, and they finally came out with a medication to help those women get pregnant, and she took the medication and she got pregnant. And so we have the first biological between my mom and my stepdad. And when our little sister was born, it was a joy. She was kind of a melding of the families. We were all in high school. And so we all like just wanted to mother her and adored her. Everyone adored her. And she was a beautiful baby to boot. And so that's kind of what our family was. I was really having a hard time. I became quite fractured because the abuse went on, and it became more, you know. What was happening, more things would start to happen. And it was just inevitable. And, Sunday afternoon, I knew it was going to happen. And I would take walks and just stay out of the house as much as I can. And we had a playground at a park down the road. I would spend, an afternoon there. And it didn't matter if it was 12 degrees or 112 degrees. I would just go there. And the school was a couple blocks away. There was this back alcove on the back of the school, and it kind of set in. And so I could get in there, and I was still outdoors, but I could play in there by myself, and nobody could really see me. So I had a sense of safety there. There were a couple other places, but I would walk the town or go to my little hiding places, and I would just be gone all day. And they started to get irritated that, I was gone all the time. And, but that was the only way I know to cope. And then one year I would detassel corn and stuff, and I was able to buy a bike from what I earned. And then the world really was mine, because then I could just ride my bike anywhere. And so my strategy was just to be gone, to not be there. And I remember making a friend and wanting to move in, with them. And I asked, but my mom wouldn't let me move in with them. I asked if I could live in the garage, which was ridiculous because it wasn't the kind of garage that you would live in. It's just a garage, it's bitter cold and, but to me that was better than living in my house. And we had a nice house, but I couldn't get away. Me and sister number one still had to go to my dad's, and, we, went out there. And I remember when I was 13, we were out there, and sister number one, my sister, she got in an argument and got mad at my stepmom and everything. And so she was on a plane the next day. They got her out of there. They weren't going to mess with her. And so now I'm stuck there by myself. And I may have stayed there a week. And I remember my mom called, and, it wasn't so horrible there, but it wasn't great. My stepmother, once a month, would bleach her hair. And when she bleached her hair, she was nice. She'd bleach it and roll it up, and she was nice. So one day a month, she was a nice person. I don't know what it was that made her nice on those days. And it was like night and day. But I don't know. My mom had called, and as I said earlier in my life, I was, my mom's emotional support and sounding board and comfort and blah, blah, blah. So my mom would be like, oh, is she treating you right? And blah, blah, blah. And so basically, as a perfunctory measure, no, she's not, and just all this. Well, I didn't know this, but my stepmom is on the other line upstairs listening to our conversation. I don't know why, and I come upstairs, and my stepmother's parents were there. And we get up there. Now, I had met them before because we would, when we're in Lake Tahoe, we would go out to Richfield, Utah. That's where her parents lived, and we'd do the 4th of July there. So I had met her stepmother, or her mother, and her mother was just, we were stink on her shoe. Her father was very nice, but the mother was a biatch, just like her. And anyway, so she's listening to my phone call. I come up the stairs, and I sit down. She's like, can you come sit here on the couch? And I sat down, and her mother's next to me and her father. And she just starts yelling at me and all this. And then she comes over and she slaps me on my face. You never slap me on my face because you're going to die. And I kicked her across the room and ran out of the house. And I didn't come back till later that evening. And I got back, and I guess before that it must have been, I asked my dad, we were just hanging out back. This is before all that happened with her. I said, Dad, do you really love me? Because here I am going on this situation at home. I don't want to leave my mom, but I don't want to live in that situation anymore. So I was kind of getting feelers, like, do you really love me? I didn't tell him what was happening at home. And he said, well, Leslie, I'm your father. So, of course I love you. He says, but we've not had any time together, and I don't really even know you, so it's hard to say that I really love you. Well, to a 13-year-old girl, that's a big no. And then, a few days later, the thing with Judy, my stepmother, or whatever, and so, I kick her off me, basically, and I come back home, and I'm in the restroom, and I don't know what, in the mirror, and he comes in behind me, and my dad is like 6'4", 6'2" to 6'4", he's a big guy, and he was, getting on me for kicking Judy and all this, and I just said, she's nothing but a whore. I said, and you are, and I let him have it. And he says, you look in that mirror. He says, look at how big you are. And I said, I don't care how big I am or how small I am and how big you are. She's a whore, and you're, you went up with a whore and left your family. And so I was on a plane the next day. Never went back. That was it. So that ended my relationship with my dad, but he did call my mom between there and me getting home, because I went to the ranch for a couple weeks and then came home from there, and I got in trouble from my mom about airing our family dirty laundry in front of other people. And I said, well, he's my family. That didn't work. So I got scolded for alluding. I didn't even tell my dad, just alluding to that there was some trouble at home. And so, yeah, I got in trouble for that. School was okay. My whole thing with authority wasn't that bad. My stepdad was an extreme authoritarian. So whatever authority issues I had were, I don't want to say beat out of me, because he never did hit me. My mom was the one that beat me. Now, Stacy, he did beat her, and I guess witnessing that was enough for me. He did was gonna, after me and Stacy fought, he was gonna give us both a belt, and he came after me, and I just looked at him like, after what you just did, dude, don't you dare. And he backed off, and he never ever hit me. So in a way, I had a little bit of power against being beat. But poor Stacy didn't. He broke a ruler and a yardstick and like 16 different pieces on her. And it wasn't uncommon for us to go to school with welts and stuff. And I had more face slap more times than anything with my mom. And I screwed up. I lied about it. And then I confessed at the end. But I still got drug up a flight of stairs by my hair. And Dad was at the bottom like, save me, Dad, save me. And he's just kind of like, oh. And she took me in a room. And she had a belt. I swear she thought she was Indiana Jones. That's before Indiana Jones was. And she cracked that belt like a whip. And she's like, you've had it, baby. Get a load of yourself. And she just starts whipping me and beating me with it. Well, I'm not going to let her have the satisfaction, So she just keeps beating on me and beating on me. And she's like, I'll keep beating you till you cry. Okay, I've had probably 5, 6 whips, And finally like, okay, well, if that's all I got to do, I'm going to cry. So I'm like, blah. And then she quit. But I had welts. And she had a handful of my hair for my head. My dad was extremely authoritarian. In fact, above and beyond. It was really hard. They both would ridicule us kids. The rules for Dad's daughters were not the same rules for us. Us being LDS kids, halter tops were real popular in the 70s, mid-70s, and of course those girls could wear them, but we couldn't because they're not modest. We would go to church and they wouldn't, and Dad would stay home with them, and Mom was not even allowed to really get down on those girls, to punish them or yell at them or anything, because Dad had come around and he would back my mom down. So there was not very much equality in that situation. His youngest daughter thought she knew everything and she was in charge. And his second oldest daughter, she was pretty rowdy when she first got here and starting to get a little bit of trouble. But then she decided to change herself around and became a cheerleader and dating this kind of rich guy. I don't say cool guy. And so she totally remade herself, and she became quite wonderful after that. I really did like her a lot. And but my sister number one did not get along with them. And so she started withdrawing to herself, and so, we had a hard time. I remember there were good times. Homecoming, I made my homecoming dress. And, there was good times too. It wasn't all bad. It was like, for me, it was a dual life. The abuse and stuff like that was going on, but I couldn't show it. Nobody was allowed to see it. You can't air your personal stuff in front of everybody, and nobody knows, and nobody's supposed to know, and blah, blah, blah. So I kind of had a dual identity, the abuse and the horrible stuff that was happening at home, and what it actually did to my head. And then this fake persona, and everybody, I got along with everybody. I've always been very charismatic and had friends and, go do stuff and all of that. But, there's this secret horror show that's going on at home. I was tortured. I was trapped, and, that was really horrible. My mom was always berating me for my weight. I remember I did this one song, the Helen Reddy song, and I came with this little dance routine. I spent all afternoon, a Sunday afternoon, in my room where nobody could get me, doing this routine. And I went down when I was all done in the evening, and I put on the record, and I said, "Look what I did, Mom." And I did the little song and dance her because I love to dance. And she looked at it, and I was like, "Well, what did you think?" And she said, "Leslie, you're such a pretty girl." She says, "If you just lose weight," and that I heard my whole life. If you just lose weight. And then she told me that dancers are supposed to be tall and skinny, and I'm not either. So I did start dieting. I mean, I only had like 25 pounds take off. And I dieted, and I did all kinds of exercises, especially ab, because that's where I carry my weight. And I had worked really hard, and within a couple months, I had like rock hard abs. And now school, boys in school are starting to look at me, and that made me really uncomfortable. And then I remember the next time that my stepdad came for me, he rubbed his hand all over my belly and told me how much he liked it. And I started eating the next day. I put that weight right back on and continued to eat. And I found that my weight was a protection for me. I mean, it cut out half the boys, if not more, so I didn't have to worry about them approaching me or anything, which I couldn't handle. I mean, it was like, like if you're afraid of snakes or something, right? So I had that kind of fear of men. And but Iowa was horrible. Years later, like I must have been in my early 20s, and somehow this picture of that house showed up, and I saw the house, and it was just like like little thunder lightning over it, and like for me it was a house of horrors. It was terrible. It was terrible. But we did detassel corn, and walked the beans and stuff. We worked, and we earned money, and we bought school clothes with it. Like I said, I bought my bike. So we really learned how to work and, earn money to get what we wanted. And it was like America, like Iowa's America. And so there was that quality thing. I remember Mom and Dad were not getting along for whatever reason, probably money. And she took all of us kids, even the two stepsisters. The oldest stepsister never lived with us. My dad was too authoritarian for her, so she never lived with us. While his two daughters lived with us, they both got braces. And my mom thought that that's why their mother sent them here so that Dad could afford their braces. My sister number one ended up with braces. I'm not sure about my little sister or my little brother. If one, it was my little sister, but not my little brother. But anyway, she took us all to the Amana colonies in Iowa. And we toured the different, what are they, Amish or Mennonite? Like, they had this factory where they made different like wool and stuff like that. It was really interesting, and just had a day touring the Amana colonies. And then we were going to get cleaned up and go out and get something to eat and then go to the movie being Jaws, like in theaters. But I remember getting ready, and it's me and my sister number one, and we're in a room, and my mom comes in, and I don't know what we had on the topic, but Mom was talking about, that Dad's upset and she just doesn't know what to do. And, here I am counseling my mother, and, she doesn't know if she should go back or whatever. And I just prevailed upon her, and so did my sister number one, to please don't go back. Please, Mom. She's like, I can't afford not to. How am I going to take care of now? I don't only have just 4 kids. I have 5 kids, and I'm like, Mommy, I'll work, I'll work. I'll go work. Stay. My sister number one's like, I'll work. we'll do what we have to. We can get jobs. We'll help and everything. And, just begged her to leave him, but we all went to Jaws, got scared to death, and then drove home, and we're back in that house. I tried talking to a teacher, who I really liked, and she liked me, my art teacher. And I went over to her house, and she, felt bad for me, but she was afraid that if she said anything, it would cost her her job, and her husband was sick, and she's the only breadwinner at the time. And of course, I understood that, so yeah, that wasn't a venue for help. I did tell one of my friends about it, and she betrayed me and told other people, and it became kind of a thing to hurt me with. It spread a little bit, and actually spread around, and I was ridiculed, and it became bad. But by that time, my dad had taken another transfer. And so now we were to leave that town. Just was getting real uncomfortable public. And I didn't go run around telling people. But by this girl that I told me it was happening to her. And so she told me that. I thought, okay, well then I can talk. And so I told her what was happening to me. Well, turns out she'd lied. That nothing was happening between her and her father. And I had been tricked. And then she told this really nasty girl in school, and then she spread it, and they were very mean to me about it. Kids are horrible. But by that time, we're going to move. So that is it for chapter 2. I'm not saying that there won't be an add-on of maybe possibly some good things I remember. I know this is a rough one, and these are the kind of things that do I leave it out? Do I put it in? I'm just going to tell this how it is. There was profound damage done to me in Iowa. Damage I've had to clean up the rest of my life. It broke me in two. It shattered me. And took every bit of self-esteem away I've ever had. It took away any sense of safety, any connection. I was alone in the world. And I was being tortured. And I was trapped. And meanwhile, I was in the marching band and all this other stuff. So, this really, two worlds. I believe that's where the borderline personality disorder set in. Of course, we didn't know what that was then. So, if the tales are too hard, please don't feel like you have to watch. There were joyous moments. There were happy moments. When we did have to go stay with my dad, I remember one time they sent us to church girl camp, and we were up in the Rocky Mountains, and we had so much fun. And, so as black and dark as it was, which it was, there were periods of fun and joy and being a kid. So anyway, thanks for listening. Like I said, if you want to bail, I would get it. I would understand. Love to you for listening, though. Thank you. Bye.